The glass chimed before the dessert reached the table. To family and to new beginnings, Sonia said, raising her crystal flute with the grin of someone already savoring her victory. Your son gave me the house, she added, turning to me, voice sweet like poison. You'll stay in the maid's room. A few awkward chuckles scattered around the table. One cousin clapped, confused. My sister-in-law froze mid-bite. I didn't flinch, but my fingers hidden under the linen tablecloth curled tight around the napkin on my lap. I felt my pulse throb behind my ears. The roasted duck sat untouched on my plate. Warm spices and orange glaze. I had prepared it the same way my late husband liked it back when Christmas meant something other than betrayal. Elias kept his head down. My son, my only child. The one I'd worked 3 jobs to support, who once cried when I missed a school play because I was folding laundry for strangers. Now he couldn't even meet my eyes. Sonia slid the folder onto the table like a trophy. Thick black leather, tied with a silver ribbon for flair. Her manicured fingers patted it like it was a pet she'd trained. We just need your signature to finalize the transfer, she said, as if she were offering me a holiday card. The room grew quiet. Too quiet. I glanced down at my plate, then at the file. My name was probably printed inside it, along with some legal language meant to push me into a corner. But I had not lived 68 years to be pushed. They didn't know that I'd gone to the courthouse 3 weeks earlier, that I'd sat with a lawyer who didn't smile until the paperwork was filed and notarized, that I had locked the real deed, the true one, in a fireproof box under my bed beside my old wedding veil and the hospital bracelet from Elias's birth. My fork never touched the duck. I folded my napkin slowly, set it beside the plate, and placed my hands on the table. Calm, steady, and ready. My name is Maristella. I'm 71. And this house, this brick-boned, slant-roofed, sun-stained home in Northern Virginia knows more about me than any person alive. It's not just where I've lived. It's what I've poured my life into. Every corner holds the sound of a child's footstep, a holiday meal, a slammed door, a whispered prayer. My late husband, Joseph, and I bought it with nothing but a handshake and a half-paid loan. He laid the porch tiles himself. I painted the shutters in the evenings, after my shifts at the pharmacy. When he passed, I stayed. I raised our 2 sons here. One moved to Oregon years ago, calls twice a year. But Elias stayed close. Sweet, careful Elias. The one who brought me flowers on Mother's Day. The one who used to say, "I'll never let anything happen to you, Mom." But lately, something's shifted. He comes by often, but not to visit. Not really. His questions have become too specific. Do you still keep the documents in the safe? Did you ever switch banks? Do you need help sorting your insurance paperwork? And always with Sonia close behind, pretending to admire the kitchen, while her eyes roam across the framed photos, the hardwood, the antique clock above the fireplace. Last month, Elias asked about the deed, said he needed it just to verify something for a refinancing check. I smiled, nodded, and went upstairs. What I brought back was a faded photocopy from 1998. I watched him hold it under the kitchen light, lips tightening as he realized what it was. He didn't know I was watching from the hallway mirror, that I saw the frustration flicker across his face, the disappointment. That was the moment I stopped pretending. They thought I was slow. That age had softened my memory, dulled my instincts. But I've walked through this house in the dark more times than I can count. I know its secrets better than they do. And I know when it's time to start hiding mine. Sonia entered the house like she'd been waiting years to do it that way. No knock, no pause. Just the swing of the door and the echo of her heels against the hardwood I'd polished myself that morning. She swept past me with a bright red coat draped over one arm, and an expression like the air inside offended her. This place could really use a remodel, she said, running a finger across the banister. So dark, so cramped. I said nothing, but I noticed the way she laid that fur coat on my hand-carved chair, the one Joseph and I had salvaged from a barn sale and restored piece by piece, as if it were just another outdated relic. She looked at the nativity set on the entry table, the one I'd displayed every Christmas since 1982. She picked it up casually, like moving salt and pepper, and slid it aside to make room for her oversized handbag. No apology. No question. Just assumption. Behind her, Elias lingered. Shoulders hunched. He gave me a weak smile, the kind you offer a stranger you've wronged but can't admit it to yet. And I knew. This wasn't a holiday visit. This was a declaration. They had dressed it in niceties and roast duck, but this was a staged invasion, a takeover. And the house, my house, was the battlefield. Over dinner, Sonia kept pouring champagne and making jokes that sounded like compliments if you weren't listening closely. She mentioned how large the house was for one woman, how the second floor must be so hard on your knees, how Elias was worried about all that responsibility falling on me. Then came the toast. She stood, glass-raised, high lips curled in triumph. To family, she said, and to the beautiful home Elias is signing over to start our new chapter. The room froze, and she smiled at me, wide and blinding. But it wasn't joy behind that smile. It was ownership. It was conquest. And I smiled back, careful and cold, because I wasn't done fighting. Not yet. The week before Christmas, Sonia showed up unannounced, clutching a tin of cookies she didn't bake. She greeted me with an exaggerated smile and a compliment about my winter garden. My winter garden, which she'd once called a pile of sticks. I knew right then something was coming. We sat in the kitchen, the scent of cinnamon in the air. But her words carried something sharper. She sipped her coffee, then leaned in like we were old friends. There's this new senior community in Maple Hollow. It's beautiful, Maristella. Full-time nurses, no stairs. They even have a craft room. I stirred my tea. Sounds nice, I said. She tilted her head. A house this size is dangerous at your age, don't you think, all those steps? And winters can be brutal here. You should consider downsizing before it collapses on you. She smiled again. It wasn't advice. It was a warning dressed in sugar. I nodded politely. I even thanked her for the cookies. But the moment the door shut behind her, I grabbed my coat and my purse. By that afternoon, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, the same man who helped Joseph and me buy the house back in 1983. I want to protect it, I told him, from people who think it's theirs already. We drafted a new deed. Life estate. Usufruct mine in perpetuity. Irrevocable. No one, not even Elias, could kick me out. Not legally. Not quietly. When I signed it, my hands shook. But my breath came easier than it had in months. I left the office with the papers sealed in a folder and tucked it into my bag like a shield. That night, I lit a small candle under the window and sat with my thoughts. Sonia's cookies were untouched on the counter. I looked at them once, then slid them into the trash tin and all. And I finally slept through the night. Because while Sonia prepared her Christmas surprise, I had already unwrapped mine. Christmas Eve. I had just set down the last plate roasted duck with pear-glazed rosemary potatoes, green beans sautéed in garlic. Everything smelled like comfort and home. Elias barely touched his fork. Sonia waited until the clinking stopped and everyone had a bite. Then she stood tapping her spoon against her champagne glass like it was her wedding again. Let's toast to the future, she said, smiling so wide it looked rehearsed. Elias and I made a big decision. Starting January, this house will be in my name. Silence. The kind of silence that wraps around your throat and squeezes. She didn't pause. She basked in it. My name will be on the deed finally. For tax reasons, of course. And security. Legal simplicity. She glanced at Elias, who kept his eyes locked on his plate. Then she smiled at me, that soft predator smile. You don't need to worry, Maristella. We'd never put you out. You'll have the maid's room upstairs, close to the laundry, no stairs to bother your knees. A few chuckles broke the tension. Glasses clinked. Someone mumbled, "Cheers." I didn't move. Then came the folder. She pulled it from her bag like a magician, revealing a trick glossy and thick, and slid it across the table until it rested neatly in front of me. Just a signature. "And it's all official," she said. I looked down. My own name printed across documents I'd never seen, next to lines drawn for me, like boundaries I was expected to cross willingly. But I didn't reach for the pen. I reached for the warmth of my memory, the feel of my husband's hand as we laid the first floorboards, the way the roof creaked that winter we couldn't afford insulation, the pain in my back the year I dug out the garden myself, shovel by shovel. I didn't need to read the folder to know it wasn't mine. And Sonia didn't need to know yet that she'd already lost. I didn't raise my voice. I simply adjusted my shawl, looked at my son, and asked, "Would you like me to tell them? Or will you?" The laughter died instantly. Elias froze, eyes wide. His fork slipped from his hand and clattered onto the porcelain plate, the sound slicing through the room like a warning shot. Sonia blinked. "Tell what she asked." But her voice wavered. I stood slowly, carefully, every movement deliberate. "That house isn't yours to give," I said. "And it never will be." The smile drained from her face. I walked to the sideboard near the Christmas wreath and pulled open the drawer where I kept stamps and extra linens. From the back, I took out the manila envelope I had placed there that morning. I laid it down beside her leather folder, plain but heavier in weight and meaning. "Original deed," I said. "Filed and protected. Life estate. Usufruct. You'll find the stamp from the county office on the second page." Sonia didn't move. Her fingers hovered above the envelope like it might burn her. Elias rubbed his temples, then covered his face with both hands. The room held its breath. At the far end of the table beside the tree, twinkling with glass ornaments, my longtime friend Thomas cleared his throat. He was dressed in quiet grays, not his notary attire, but his presence was no accident. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. Sonia's lips parted, but no sound came. I turned to the table, to the neighbors and cousins and old friends who'd watched my boys grow up under this roof. "The property is secured," I said evenly. "No transfer is valid without my signed release. And I don't plan to release anything except the air in this room, which has grown too heavy with lies." I reached over and poured myself a fresh glass of water. Then I sat, not in defeat, but in return. And I watched Sonia realize she hadn't walked into a victory, she'd walked into a reckoning. Sonia's voice cut through the room like broken glass. "You lied to me," she shrieked at Elias, pushing back from the table so hard her chair scraped across the wood. "You said it was already signed. You said it was ours." Elias's mouth opened, but nothing came. Just the pale look of a man caught between two flames. I didn't think she'd fight back," he stammered. And there it was, the truth. Not wrapped in excuses, not dressed in guilt. They never expected me to resist. They thought age made me docile, that grief had made me easier to manage, that my silence was surrender. They forgot who raised them, who built this house from scratch after burying a husband and shouldering debt no one else would touch. I pushed my chair back slowly, letting the sound carry. Then I stood. "I'll clear the air since neither of you seems to remember how I said, my voice steady." I turned to the guests, some family, some neighbors, all of them staring. 3 weeks ago, Elias came asking for the deed. He said it was for insurance, in case anything ever happened to me, I said. I let the words hang there. He lied. Gasps rippled around the table like dropped silverware. "And Sonia?" I added, "You weren't just misinformed, You were complicit. You visited with cookies and compliments, then tried to sell me a senior center with a smile. She looked like she wanted to speak, but the panic was already swallowing her composure. Then I turned to Elias. You tried to buy her love with the home I built, I said quietly. You sold a roof that wasn't yours to give. And tonight, you tried to seal it with a toast. He looked up finally, but his eyes were empty. Even the cousins who hadn't spoken in years sat frozen as if any noise might break the spell of shame hanging over the table. No one moved, not even me. I returned to my seat and folded my napkin. And for the first time that night, no one dared reach for their glass. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand again. I didn't need to. I looked at Sonia, then Elias. Then I said, "This dinner is over. You can leave." Sonia opened her mouth to protest, but only a noise came out. Sharp, thin, useless. Elias stared at his plate like it might give him an answer. I pointed at the door, then at the folder still resting on the table like a roach that refused to crawl away. "Take your papers," I said, "and take your disrespect with them." Sonia gripped the folder so tightly the leather bent under her fingers. "You'll regret this," she spat. I gave her a smile so calm it scared even me. "I already did," I said. "That's why I protected myself." And that was it. No grand exit. No final insults. Just their footsteps across the tile, their coats hastily pulled on the sound of heels and dress shoes that no longer belonged in my hallway. Then the front door, solid oak carved by hand when we first bought this place, swung closed behind them. It didn't slam. It settled. And that sound was more satisfying than anything they could have said. The people who mattered, who still mattered, remained. My neighbor Marta quietly started stacking the plates. Cousin Harold gathered wine glasses without spilling a drop. No one spoke of what just happened. No one needed to. They helped me rinse the silverware dry. The serving trays tuck away the good china. And in the lull between dishwasher hum and warm water on my hands, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Stillness. Not the stillness of fear. Not the kind that comes before betrayal, but the kind that arrives after the storm has passed. My house had felt like it was shifting under me, a constant tremor of doubt and expectation. But now it felt like it had taken a breath, like the beams and floorboards and tile had remembered who lived here, who stayed, and who did not. The last glass clinked into the drying rack. I turned off the light above the sink. Later that night, the quiet felt earned. I sat at the kitchen table alone, the one with the worn edges and the heat mark from a Thanksgiving 10 years ago. The pear glaze had cooled into a glossy shell. The duck untouched. The chairs around me were empty, but the air no longer felt suffocating. I reached for a teacup one from the old floral set I saved for holidays and first visits. I used to believe tradition could hold a family together, that a matching set and a warm roast could silence resentment. Now I knew better. I poured hot water, added a pinch of chamomile. My hands didn't shake. My breath stayed steady. I didn't cry. I didn't rehearse comebacks or replay the toast. I just sat quiet as the house and whispered, "Thank you," not to Sonia, not to Elias, but to the version of myself who had listened to her gut a month ago, who didn't ignore the unease, who walked into the courthouse alone, who read the fine print, who filed every page, sealed every signature, locked the safe, and changed the code. She wasn't angry. She wasn't afraid. She was tired, but wise, and she had protected me. I lifted the plate in front of me. White porcelain, gold rim, a single chip near the edge. I remembered dropping it years ago. It had bounced, spun, landed flat. I kept it. A flaw didn't make it useless. Neither did mine. I traced the rim with my finger, then set it down gently. The plate didn't break tonight, and neither did I. I rinsed my cup, dried it with the towel Sonia once said smelled too old, and hung it back on the hook by the window. Then I turned off the lights, every single one, until only the porch lamp glowed outside, warm, soft, steady. It was still Christmas, just a different kind. The tree still sparkled. The angel still stood. And I, for once, wasn't waiting for someone to make it right. Because it already was. And in the morning, I'd wake up in my own home. 6 months is just long enough for the ivy to start reclaiming the back fence. I wake early now. Not because I have to, but because I want to. The house is quiet in the morning, the kind of quiet that feels like peace, not tension. Twice a week, the doorbell rings. Sometimes it's Carla from next door holding a tin of soup wrapped in a towel. Sometimes it's Bernard, the retired school teacher who likes to talk about tomatoes and the weather. And sometimes it's no one, just the mail slot, clicking with a card or a catalog I'll toss in the bin. But once, just once, it was Elias. He didn't knock, just stood there. I saw him from the upstairs window. He looked thinner, or maybe just smaller. He stayed on the porch 20 minutes. I made tea. I didn't open the door. Because if he came to ask about my health, I would have welcomed him in. But he came to ask if there was still a way back in. Back into the deed. Back into the plan. Back into something he never really built. I let the kettle boil twice that day. Just to fill the space. Now I water the plants. Sonia said were too much work. I replaced her perfume-slick throw pillows with my old embroidered ones. The kind with real thread, not sequins. The bedroom still smells like cedar and rosewater. Not that Sonia ever noticed. She hasn't come back. Not since that night. The bedroom is mine. The kitchen is mine. The dented railing on the stairs, the chipped tiles near the back door, the humming radiator in winter, they're all mine. The house isn't big. It creaks when it rains. The gutters need cleaning. The porch swing still leans left. But it holds. And so do I. I keep the real deed in the safe, but I keep the copy by my nightstand. Not out of paranoia, but because some things deserve to be seen every day. The ink, the seal, the signature. Proof that I didn't give it away. Proof that I didn't give myself away either.